Welcome to Pandemic 2020, a series on the impact of coronavirus. I'm your host, Jessica Kwong. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Kurt Boone from Newark, New Jersey. He's a courier, a street photographer, and an author who's been documenting New York City for more than 20 years. Kurt, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very good, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much again for joining me. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what type of photography specifically you do, and what you do as a courier.
Okay, I'll start with my courier work first. So I've been a courier over 20 years, worked with 4 or 5 different companies over those years. And basically, I'm a rush mail carrier. And generally what that means is a company would place an order for a courier. I would go pick it up and then deliver the job. And usually that whole transaction from pickup to delivery is about 90 minutes or less.
Do you take, when you're on the job, or when you're taking a break, or how often would you start taking pictures?
Well, okay, so the pictures came in. I started taking pictures about 10 years ago. First shooting messengers. So I hung around, because I love photography, but I hung around a lot of professional photographers, and I learned a lot from them. And so I picked up, that one of my photography mentors, his name is Bob Gore, he gave me a digital camera, and he said I should shoot myself. And I started shooting myself. And being that I know what a good photograph looks like, I was able to apply my own kind of trademark to my pictures. Just because of what I do as a courier, it applies to my street photography. So that's it. I was filming. I was photographing my friends first, bike messengers, skateboarders. That's how I started photographing them. And then, since I was a subway rider, I wanted to take something from the subway outside of like taking a subway sign or something. So that's too. Everybody does that. So what I did was I had this project in mind, and I photographed like 30 subway musicians, while I was on the job, and I did it so quick. In like 2 weeks, I had 30 subway musician photographs. So I said, wow, this is an amazing little story here that I come across, because I started to see an uptick in buskers in the subway. And since I had so many, I came up with an idea to do a blog, on subway musicians. And I did these photographs while I worked as a messenger. So to bring it fast forward, I got a publishing deal. I did a book called Subway Beats. It has like over 270 different artists. And so that was pretty cool to get that book made. And that all came from my work as a messenger, and then photographing while I'm on the job.
So during the pandemic, did you continue to work as a courier and also taking photos, or did that affect you? I mean, I know I'm not quite sure if a courier is an essential worker or not. So since we're focused on the coronavirus, I really wanted to get your take on that. And you're sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yes, the essential worker was considered. The courier wasn't considered an essential worker. So I was allowed to be out there. I was allowed to work. I'll say it like that. I was allowed to work. And so
did you have a lot during the virus, especially around March, when it really started to spike and people were just sheltering in place? Did you have a lot of work, or were you kind of out of work too?
Well, I mean, since the offices were closed, and most of the messenger company clients are the offices were closed, so there's no work to come out of here. But we were getting some small work, just Broadway. If you just looked at Broadway, and just seeing Broadway shut down, but you could even look at all the four-star hotels, all closed down, and then all the restaurants. So the city was losing. I mean, everybody's trying to stay alive, so I shouldn't say lose money, but they are losing money. But just seeing all that closed down, is unbelievable. It's really, really something out of space, sci-fi, but it's real. It's real.
Did you feel, I mean, what sort of feelings went through you as you were making these deliveries and seeing it? I mean, did you feel like the virus, did you feel like the threat of death? I mean, you're out there risking your life doing this, right? I mean, you never know who touched the package or anything like that. People sometimes don't show symptoms and, they're asymptomatic, but you can still catch the virus. So were you ever afraid that you could catch the virus or anything like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, I have a lung I'm 60 years old, so I have a lung condition. So obviously I can, I'm one of the people who can get the virus and die, but I had to work to pay my rent. So that the idea of me not working wasn't a solution, right? Because I had to work. But like the first 2 weeks, I didn't have a mask on because I think the CDC said masks weren't required, right? So
wear a mask, but if you're somebody who's healthy, then you don't have to wear a mask. That was like really early on. Yeah.
That was really early on. But once the CDC saw that everyone should wear a mask, then I started wearing the mask. Right. And then I kept my 6 feet away, But on the streets, there were really nobody on the streets. The subways, as you know, were for only essential workers, right? So the subway cars were empty. So it was really no one for me to be in contact with outside of me just doing my job. So for me just to pick up a package and deliver and not talk to nobody or have a conversation, I felt that, I could protect myself from the virus, as long as I follow all the rules and I didn't do anything outside of the room, I felt that I could stay safe and work. So, but I would say towards like about 10 weeks into the virus, the work started getting slow. So one of my bike messenger friends said that self-employed messengers could become eligible for unemployment. So I applied for the unemployment and I got it. And so what I decided to do, rather than risk my life the next 4 or 5 weeks, I took what you call the emergency unemployment funds. I took that the last 4 weeks.
So basically, it seems like you didn't catch the virus. It seems like you're healthy right now, and you, as far as you know, you didn't come in contact, and you're okay, right?
Right. As far as I know, I still need to take the test. I think everybody should take the test. So I'm going to take the test soon. I need to take it. But as far as I know, I don't have some symptoms of the virus. But you really don't know until you take the test. So I need to take the test. But recently, since they opened up the buildings and phase 2, they take your temperature going into buildings. Right. So I've been getting my temperature checked, and I haven't, they haven't given me any signal that I have a fever or anything. So far I think I'm okay, but I still need to take the test.
Right, it's a good idea for everyone to get tested. I wanted to know more about, when you're going through the streets, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, and they were empty, I know that as a photographer, you always want to capture a subject, a person, right? Because it brings emotion, it pretty much tells the story of a place. But were you still photographing all these empty streets of New York, or did you feel like because there's no one out there, there's not a subject, you didn't have the urge to photograph still?
So what I did was I'm an eclectic photographer. So I'm always looking for unique things to photograph. So what I decided to do is to document the scene. So I took pictures of some open streets, but that's something anybody can kind of do, right? So I took the open street. But what I did was I went around and I photographed a lot of signs in retail stores. and somewhere handwritten. So it would say, you would have a handwritten sign would say, "Oh, we're closed because of COVID-19," right? And then on the upscale stores, say like on Fifth Avenue, every store would have a letterhead saying we're closed because of COVID-19. So I thought that's so interesting. So the Nike store, the Adidas store, all these fancy stores.
Lifetime, right?
Yeah, and they all had, letters on their windows. So I photographed a lot of those letters, and then I don't usually shoot the homeless as a street photographer. That's not what I do. I shoot graffiti. I'll shoot skateboarders. I'll shoot street fashion. I'll shoot that, but I don't shoot homeless. That's not my thing. But since there was so many on the streets, I was just compelled to photograph homeless people because they were just everywhere. Every 2 or 3 blocks, there'd be a homeless person laying on the ground. I'm saying, what is this? Because I thought like some of the cities, they closed off some shelters where the homeless couldn't go to their normal places. So for example, Penn Station, where there would be probably loads and loads of homeless people sleeping there, they shut it down. So the homeless people had to move outside, and some don't want to go to shelters. So they sleep on the street. Or they'll get an empty subway car and they'll bring their belongings onto the subway car and they'll sleep on the subway car. But yeah, and I'm assuming if you're in the media and you follow it, MTA, the governor, he closed down the subway, right? For cleaning, to get all the homeless out.
So that's streets because they couldn't be in the subway, right?
Right, that's right. So they're all on the street. So I photographed a lot of homeless, I photographed homeless, I photographed retail stores. I even photographed some of the dark hotels. So like the Four Seasons, right? The Four Seasons over on 57th Street is a super rich hotel, and they got plywood.
For sharing those thoughts with us, Kurt. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more Pandemic 2020. Welcome back to Pandemic 2020, a series on the impact of coronavirus. I still have Kurt Boone with me. He is a street photographer and courier, and he's been documenting the streets of New York for more than 20 years. Kurt, thank you so much for talking to me about the coronavirus, especially from your perspective as a street artist. I wanted you to go into some of your specific images. One of the ones that really caught my eye was the World Trade Center, completely empty. You don't see a single person there. You mentioned earlier that you don't, anyone could take a photo of a building or just a place, but what made you want to capture this moment of not seeing really anyone at the World Trade Center?
Yeah, that's a very interesting image because I was going home to Newark, and I go through the Oculus every day, and just it's always packed with people. But on my way home, it was completely like empty, void of people, like a ghost town. So I'm like, it was amazing. It was I mean, it was sad, and and they had the American flag like right there, so you could see like the mall was like trying to give people spirit in the empty closed mall by having a flag that's saying, hold on. That's what I was getting the image like, because it was sad that the whole mall was closed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then similarly, I saw that you had this image of the subway also completely empty. So that's, around what time of the day was that taken? Because I know the subway started closing from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. So what time of the day was that you would see no one at the subway?
That was about 11:30. That photograph I have there is about 11:30.
At night?
12, and no, this is during the day.
Wow, okay.
So you have to remember the subway MTA they would only have essential workers riding the trains. Mm-hmm. So all the platforms were empty. Subway cars were empty because it was only for essential workers. So it just the train stations were empty. So I just I was coming across these empty subway stations, and usually it's really full of people. And that photo shows Chambers Street. Chambers Street is always full of commuters traveling, and for it to be completely empty is completely something that comes from the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And then I saw that some of your images started changing, like you started seeing people coming back in because of the Black Lives Matter protests. And I saw this one photo that you took of, several protesters behind a red rope. What was happening in that moment?
Okay, so that was a march coming down West Street. They had the march started on Broadway, and then they started heading towards West Street, which is almost like the start of the West Side Highway. Mm-hmm. And so these protesters, they had some protesters in the front who are wearing like highlight jackets. And so what they did, the people with the highlight jackets, they blocked the traffic on the highway. And then the protesters came right through there. And there was about 300 of them. And they all was on the highway. So I got to the front and I just started photographing the front. And then they had the line, they had a rope to kind of keep everybody balanced. So, it's like a balancing act so that the people in the front would stay level and not be, walking or marching out of line, so like a military format, except using a rope to manage the crowd.
And I know you got pretty close up to this group of small group of people. What emotions were you trying to capture? And when you look back at this photo, what do you remember about what they were saying, or especially with them being behind a rope? I think that's really interesting.
They were chanting Black Lives Matter, defund the police, mm-hmm. and that would be like a chorus. So they would have the leaders who were leading the march, they would have megaphones, and they would have like this chorus, Black Lives Matter. They would have a chant, George Floyd, and they would all be in sync. And so I tried to capture not only the marchers, but also the leaders leading the march. So you get a very close image of that leader chanting, and it's a compelling image because you're actually really close to the scene, or you could actually see what's happening, and the energy among these young people was so real. It's like I've never seen anything like it. Like they were serious about marching and protesting police brutality.
Really, because there's been a lot of Black Lives Matter protests over the years, and over your 20 years, I'm sure you've seen other protests. Did you feel like this was different, or there was like more passion in this than you've seen in Black Lives Matter movements before, or how was it similar or different?
Well, in this, yes, it's really different. I mean, I've seen smaller protests, you know, not to this level, but what made this different is they have a lot of energy among the young people, but they were bringing that protest movement to the business district. So when I say the West Side Highway, that photo's on the West Side Highway. That's it's downtown. So that's a business district. Apartments around that area cost millions of dollars. So by them bringing the protest downtown and making sure the folks that are in like high society that don't feel what the inner city folks feel, because the inner city folks are struggling. But when you're downtown, you kind of like, you're pushed aside. Like your world technically kind of like, it exists, but it don't exist, right? So they was bringing that energy downtown to the folks to make sure, hey, it's time for a change. And it wasn't just Black, right? It was all kind of ethnicity in it, you know. So it was multiracial, and you know, and they were just like, you could see they were fed up. They were fed up with police brutality and the racial climate in America. You could see like they wanted change, and that's why you see like today, you see a lot of change happening because they brought the protest downtown. So if it was just in the poor neighborhoods, the rich people wouldn't respond. It'd just be the same thing. But being that it's at their doorstep, right? They said we got to do something, and so the young people, I'm impressed with them, you know, and they started taking down statues and things. So I thought like, hey, this is the time for America to kind of make their adjustments and really address these issues that's been going on for years. And obviously, I'm African American, so I've had my experiences with police. I have police officers in my family as well. So, but as a Black man, you learn to be very careful when you talk to police, right? It's just a natural thing. So I definitely feel for, you know, a lot of the folks that who've been hurt by police brutality, and so something needs to be done. So I'm glad to see it. You know, I'm glad to see the protests, and I'm glad to see like the mayor. He may take he may cut some of the police budgets, you know, and so it's really amazing. So yeah, and some of the photos, like one of the photos I have is that
people, like a lot of people in the photos. So what was your objective on taking these, like, you know, like the huge march coming down versus like focusing on the emotions of a few people?
Well, okay, so you know, it's if I could, one of the things I do, if I could capture a moment of someone, of street people, and it's unique, and I can convey that in an image, I'm going to take it. So I don't generally look for the emotion. It's more like if I catch it, it's more a half a second or 1 second look where I say, wow, that's the image, and I would take it, you know, because a lot of times images are just hard to, you can't predict it. So you, especially on the street is like, if you blink, you can miss a moment. So you always kind of got to be ready and be able to capture a moment, you know, when you see it. And so I'm pretty much open-minded, and I don't go into a situation per se looking for something. I know what I'm looking for, but I don't go in looking for it. I try to let the situation dictate what I need to shoot.
Those are really good tips from for street photography, because I also take photos. I'm not professional like you, but sometimes I go in looking for something. But because I haven't done so much street photography as you have, I didn't know that it was, you know, that sort of dynamic of capturing the moment when you see it, and you just have that split second to do it, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of circle back to the coronavirus. So especially in the beginning of this pandemic, there were a lot of news reports and images of really, really horrific things like, bodies and trailers outside of hospitals. Did you ever take any of those photos, or did you take any photos that were just so horrific? Or did you see something and decide not to capture it just because it was so gruesome? I wanted to get some of, I wanted to hear about that if you had any.
Well, the only thing that I saw, well, first I did take images, of stuff that normally I wouldn't, but it's just in front of me, and that's in particularly the homeless. So I have hundreds of photos of homeless people that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with. But it was just sad to see so many people strung out. But the doctor office that I worked for was on East 77th Street. It was across the street from Mount Sinai Hospital. Mm-hmm. And in the back entrance where they have the loading dock, I saw like a lot of tanks. And I can't say if they were body, for body bags or anything, but it was a lot of them. And they look like storage for some storage, big storage refrigerators, And then they had this
just not want to capture that moment because it was not pleasant.
No, I didn't. But what it was, I took some shots from a distance, but I didn't get too close because I didn't know like what was going on. I just saw security there, and then they had like a canopy where cars would go into this canopy, and they would unload something, and I thought they were maybe unloading bodies because there was like so many bodies that they had to bring those bodies in through the back entrance and just hide that they were bringing bodies to the hospital. So I thought that was like really, really, really sad. And I was at Mount Sinai on East 77th Street. And that whole area, there were ambulances like all over the place. 10 ambulances on the street. And they're constantly going in and out. And you can imagine that for 24 hours. That could tell you like emotionally what's going on, what's going on. It's really, really sad, and I feel for the families too, because I haven't lost nobody in my own family to COVID-19, but, I feel the emotion of our fellow New Yorkers passing away. So I do have a sensitivity to that,
Well, thank you so much, Kurt, for sharing these insights from your perspective as a courier and street photographer during the coronavirus pandemic. This episode of Pandemic 2020 was so great. Thanks to you, and thank you everyone for tuning in from home. I hope you're staying safe and healthy from your quarantine.